Welcome to, I think this is called the Spotlight Interview with, who are you again? Her first comment upon taking her seat was, there's so many famous writers here, I don't know if I can handle it.
Well, it's true, I'm overwhelmed.
Well, are you nervous to be up here with me because I know all the dirt?
A little bit, yes.
A little bit,
yes.
Okay. Okay, I thought I would start here. Okay, whenever I go out on the road and am asked a question about you, this is the first thing I'm always asked. What is the best piece of advice on writing she has ever given you? Do you know what it is? Do you know what I'm thinking of?
Write the book you want to read.
Exactly.
Write the book you want to live in, too.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And if you're not writing the book that you want to read, you have a problem.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
Because there's some other agenda at work. You're writing the book that
Right.
you think is going to win an award, or the book that you think is going to be reviewed well by a certain critic.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Okay. But in the Bay Area in the 1970s, when you went into writers' workshops and bookstores and said you wanted to write about vampires, how did that go?
It went over very badly. Even my own doctor told me maybe that wasn't such a
Your
good idea.
doctor? What did he say?
I said I'd written this book and it was called Interview with the Vampire, and he said, maybe you should change the title of that book. It was a GP, just an examination, and he volunteered that.
Did he have a suggestion for a title change?
No,
What my
I think
doctor
he just-
thinks?
I think at that time, vampires were just a late show subject, and the whole idea of a book named Interview with the Vampire was a bit ridiculous. I entered the manuscript in the Joseph Henry Jackson Award competition, and the reader threw it out without giving it to the judges.
So tell us what that means. There was like a selection committee?
Yeah, there was a reader who went through and threw out many manuscripts that he just didn't think the judges would be interested in, and Interview with the Vampire was one of them. One of the judges told me this later because he asked to see the manuscript specifically, and the reader had already thrown it out. He had to go get it and bring it back.
Wow.
But I mean, that's how negative the atmosphere was for anything about vampires. I mean, who would have predicted what we now have in America? I mean, it's a genre.
You did.
Well, I didn't know I was making a market prediction. I just knew
Right.
I was writing what I wanted to write, the book I wanted to read.
Right.
Yeah.
And that book was what? It was you wanted to go into the head of the vampire. You wanted to know what the vampire thought.
Right, exactly. And I now, when I look back on that period, I can see that there was a shift in America at that time. People wanted the backstory of heroes and villains that had never before been revealed. And The Godfather, for example, did really the same thing. I mean, it came out and gave you the backstory of mafiosi that had just been heavy villains in movies before. Mm-hmm. And suddenly you're hearing all about their family values and their ideas and their love for one another and things like this. And then the Superman movie came shortly after. Mario Puzo, in fact, wrote the script for the first Superman movie, and it was the same thing. It did high production values to give you the real story of Superman, whom you'd only seen in comic books and on TV series that treated him as a very flat character. Mm-hmm. Suddenly you saw something else. But, you know, all these things happened at once for different reasons. I wasn't aware that all that was going on. I just knew I wanted to get into the vampire and tell things from his point of view, that there was this tragic potential to this figure, and that we never got it in the vampire movies. We just never got it in the stuff we saw on the screen.
But was the tragic potential from the fact that the vampire had remorse about being a vampire? And have you ever seen that remorse depicted in any film or novel before then?
Well, I'll tell you where the remorse was shown. It was shown in the early black and white Wolfman films and Frankenstein films. The monster was always suffering in those early films. Mm-hmm. And the Wolfman, Lon Chaney Jr., was the regretful, agonized supernatural hero par excellence, you know. Right. But no, I had never seen it in any vampire film. Mm-hmm. And I really thought, well, what would it be like, you know, to be made into a vampire? Realize you have to kill the thing you love in order to live.
Right.
And suppose you did have this wonderful preternatural vision, and you were able to see life as you'd never seen it before, and yet you had to take life. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was what I wanted to explore.
Right.
Yeah.
And was it always planned as a series? I actually don't know the answer to this question.
It was never planned as a series.
Never?
Never. No. In fact, I don't think I've ever planned a series. Ever, really. I've always written a book and then decided at the end whether I wanted to go on with that book or that story.
Right. And what did you decide at the end of Interview with the Vampire?
That I wanted to tell the whole thing from the point of view of the character of Lestat, the heavy, in the novel, that he didn't get to tell his story.
Right.
Sort of another stage of telling the villain's story. And I didn't do it for 8 years. I went off and wrote 2 other books, and then I came back to Lestat.
And why didn't you do it for 8 years?
I'm not sure. I wanted badly to do a novel called Feast of All Saints about the free people of color in the South before the Civil War, and I'd done a lot of research for that novel. So I did it, and then I did Cry to Heaven about the 18th century castrati opera singers, and those were just 2 things I had to get done. And then I felt kind of eager to get back to the vampires.
And the novel that you got back to it with was The Vampire Lestat.
That's right, and that's the novel that really began the Vampire Chronicles. I mean, there was, no Vampire Chronicles before that. I mean, that was it, really, and for many people, that's still the first novel in the series.
And that was Lestat telling his version of events that you had witnessed in Interview with a Vampire, and it was a different version.
And a completely different story, a much bigger story.
Right.
Introduced many more characters and a whole origin myth for the vampires.
And I remember the day you got the phone call in the kitchen that it had debuted at number 9 on the New York Times bestseller list, and I remember you screaming, "Number 9! Number 9!" And I had no idea what was going on. I was 8! So is she gonna be okay?
Well, that was the first time on the hardcover list, so I was very excited. Yeah, I was very excited.
It was. And so
wonderful.
Did you know at that moment that the door to this new world was completely open and you were going to be writing in it for a while?
No, I didn't really think about it. Again, I just go book by book. I'm not sure when the idea for the 3rd book, Queen of the Damned, came to me, but it did. And then after that, I went on to write The Witching Hour. I just moved to, I think I did. I'm not even sure. No, I think I wrote Tale of the Body Thief first and then The Witching Hour.
Where was The Mummy in that, which is one of your most popular books?
Oh, The Mummy. Where was The Mummy? It was somewhere around that time, too.
Yeah.
I did The Mummy. It was done as a paperback original. It was not done by my regular publisher. And it had started as an idea for television, really. And I developed, I did a script for TV, and then developed the novel based on the script, and Ballantine published it. And it's a much lighter novel, I think, than my others, and it was a lot more fun.
Right.
Yeah.
So, are your books thrillers?
Yes, I hope
Okay.
so.
Are you saying
Absolutely.
that just because we are here at Thriller Fest?
No. I have always wanted to tell a thrilling story, no matter what I was writing. I've always had the utmost respect for that and desire to do that with whatever I was writing. And at the time that I first became a writer, there was a lot of scorn for storytelling amongst the people I knew. There was a lot of
about
contempt.
that. Was that a sort of Bay Area writers group thing, and it all needed to be relevant and political?
Well, I think at that time there was a strong feeling that high literature in America was pedestrian realism about the middle class. It was people didn't say that I'm writing pedestrian realism about the middle class.
Introduction to middle class literature. Yeah, no, that wasn't a college course.
That's what they thought was really important. They thought stuff like what I was doing was just junk. They would even say so. When are you going to stop writing about all this and really write a novel? About.
And what was a real novel about? Your mom? Was it family structured
something like that. It was
coming of age story.
I remember at the time trying to pin down what I felt they wanted. They wanted a small novel with a small epiphany about somebody with whom everyone could identify as a member of the middle class, in which almost all the things that interested me weren't considered valid or realistic.
Like what? What were those things?
Death, suffering, loss. It was more their novels.
Religion.
Yeah, anything.
Spirituality.
Yeah. But I mean, to put it bluntly, I think people who write the kind of fantasy that I write, that is our reality. That is the way we touch our reality. That's the only way we can write about our experience. And it feels completely real to us to write about it like that.
Right.
And that's why, writing Interview with the Vampire, for me, was a big breakthrough, because suddenly I felt I could turn everything that had ever happened to me into material in that book in some symbolic way. New Orleans, where I'd grown up, the ghost stories I'd heard, the tragedies in our family, all of that, the obsession with darkness and shadows, the Gothic side of New Orleans, the Gothic side of the South, it was all in there. I had access to it. And when I was trying to write pedestrian realism, I just couldn't do it.
Right.
I just couldn't get to it. I couldn't
Right.
get to the extremes that made sense to my mind.
But at the time, and this is something that Dad said in interviews, at the time, if somebody had pointed out that the 5-year-old girl, Vampire Claudia, might have been a metaphor for your daughter, my sister Michelle, who you lost to leukemia when she was a young girl.
Right.
If someone had pointed that out to you at the time, you would have said, no way, no way.
Oh, I did. I mean, I didn't think it had anything to do with her. I remember we went out for a drink one night at this college bar called the Cheshire Cat, and I had finished Interview with the Vampire, and he hadn't read it yet. And I told him about it. I told him the whole plot of the novel, and he said, oh, a 4-year-old vampire, that's just too young, and that's just too young. So I made her 5 or 6, you know.
Oh.
And so I thought, okay. But it never occurred to either one of us to say, you must be writing about Michelle. You must be
Right.
writing about it. When I was in that novel, all I was thinking about was what came next in the story. And I tunneled into that story, and I felt my way through what Louis and Lestat, the 2 vampires, were doing. They brought Claudia into their little unholy family, and she became a very distinct character that really had nothing to do with my daughter, you know, or your sister. And I think consciously thinking about where all this comes from would have blocked me completely. That's part of why fantasy was so
Right.
so inviting and so intense for me, because I didn't have to confront it all consciously.
Right. But I think that point that you made, that no matter what genre we're working in, we're all writing essentially about the things that deeply matter to
Yeah,
us.
definitely.
Is something that's worthwhile, and it's something that a writer of any genre needs to tell themselves as they find their genre dismissed by people from other genres over and over and over
Yes.
again.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
And I think that's important. But is it something that you are still sort of sensitive to today? If somebody were to psychoanalyze something you wrote last week and say, well, you're writing this because this happened to you when you were 16, would it shut you down or make you self-conscious about it? We don't have
No.
those types of conversations because I know better.
No. No, I think it kind of rolls off me now.
Yeah.
You know, but I've
You're
had
tough.
I am tough.
You're tough.
But I've had a lot of experience of reading those kinds of comments, you know.
Yeah, Facebook has made you tough.
It has made
Yeah.
me tough. Yes. But I love Facebook.
Yeah, you do love Facebook. You're
Yeah,
on
I
Facebook
do.
all the time.
I do.
Yeah.
I love the people of the page, you know.
You have a nickname for them, the
Yeah.
people of the page. There are 750,000 of them currently, all with a different opinion about every issue, it seems
Right.
like.
Right, yeah.
I suggested to you once that maybe you were, you know, spending so much time on Facebook that you weren't getting your book written, and I told you the story of Margaret Mitchell, who it was said answered so much fan mail she never wrote a sequel to Gone with the Wind, and you pointed out she was also hit by a car, which was so.
That was a
Avoid
big
cars, Anne Rice. It's the best thing for your career. So going back to the biography sort of portion, something that happened, I believe it was in between The Queen of the Damned and The Witching Hour, is that we moved to New Orleans.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. And the impetus for that for you was?
The impetus for
Yeah.
that, for moving back to New Orleans?
Yeah. I know the answer, but they may not know.
What answer are you going to give? What's the answer?
You said if I have to deal with one more foggy morning in San Francisco, I'm going to lose my mind.
Well,
It was something
actually,
like that.
I was in communication with a journalist in New Orleans, Millie Ball, who wrote for the
Right.
Times-Picayune, and I called down there and asked her, you know, I just wanted to go back so badly, and I
But
just...
what was that about? That's really what I'm asking
we
about.
had gone over to Berkeley to see a friend, Betsy Eubner, if you remember. We'd gone over to her house,
right.
and it was covered. It was very warm in Berkeley, and it was covered with morning glory vines. And we had talked a lot about New Orleans at that dinner. And I had come home wanting so badly to be in the South, just very frustrated. And for some reason, I just had to go. I wanted to go. I said, let's go just for the summer. Let's just see if we
Right.
can. Nobody goes to New Orleans in the summer. But
Nobody.
I would have been.
Nobody.
But when you're cold in San Francisco and you've been cold for years, you know.
22 years, as you
Yes.
used to say,
You
yes.
think about going south for the summer, and
Right.
we decided to go. We found out that there was a house down there that we could buy for a fraction of what houses cost in San Francisco, and we actually bought that house. And we went down there with the plan of spending a year and then coming back.
Yes.
And at the end of that year, we didn't want to come back.
Right.
So we stayed.
And so the series of novels that you wrote next were The Lives of the Mayfair Witches.
Right.
Do you feel you could have written those novels had you not moved back to New Orleans? You
No.
started The Witching Hour in San Francisco, if that's correct.
I did, but it was just the first few chapters. It was nothing
Right.
like what finally happened. I mean, once we moved down there, it was as if my vocabulary doubled. I mean,
Right.
I can't explain it any other way. It was so intense and so sensuous to be back home, to be around this landscape that I needed to describe. That was sort of the landscape of heartbreak and childhood and development and all that. It was as if my vocabulary doubled or tripled. I was
Right.
suddenly able to write more and longer, and all kinds of doors opened and possibilities. And The Witching Hour, I think it was 1,500 pages in manuscript.
Yes.
I didn't print it out to the end, and when I printed it out, I was just, we had a creaky little old printer. I mean, this was like 1988, and when those pages started piling up on the floor,
Right.
1,500 pages, I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
But it was a very productive 6 months for me writing that book, and that
Let
went
me
right into a
stop you.
series.
Stop you right there because I heard some reactions from the audience. 1,500 pages in 6 months.
It was about 5 months, actually, yeah. But I write well, but I write better that way. I write better in,
You're a
in
binge
very
writer.
intense. I'm a binge writer.
You're a binge
that
writer.
word. Can you
I
say
think
I'm a
it's a good-
marathon writer?
Okay, you're an intense session writer.
I'm an intense session
But this
writer,
is,
yeah.
gets me to something else that you talk about a lot. You were very discouraged early on by writing professors, as most good writers are, because they said you didn't write every day, and so you weren't a real writer.
That's right. They did, yeah.
And you still don't write every day, and I think you're a real writer. Do you think you're a real writer?
I hope so, but people are still saying I'm not.
Well, you write on Facebook every day, several times a day.
But I mean, you can go to Amazon and you can find a review of almost any book that I ever published that will say it's the worst book ever published. This
Yes.
woman can't write.
But the fun thing is you can do that for anyone. So if you go on Amazon or Goodreads or any of those sites and you read bad reviews, click on the 1-star reviews for Whom the Bell Tolls.
Yeah.
Or
Moby
for
Dick.
The Great Gatsby. I don't get it. It didn't seem so great to me. But we were talking about this earlier in a conversation with somebody else. What you consider to be writing doesn't always include putting words on the computer screen or on the page, if we're talking about a while ago. Your research can be writing. People always draw a really thick line between research and writing, but you describe the hours that you sit with the spiritual theological texts that you read now. That's how you get many of your ideas, is that act of research.
Oh, definitely. Any kind of research. It's always been that way for me. It's just, I get all kinds of ideas I can get ideas from a TV commercial. A story will come into my mind just getting a glimpse of a commercial.
Are you saying that some of your books have come from TV commercials?
No, not
Which
specifically.
ones?
Not specifically, but
The beauty
I have
books.
actually marveled at TV commercials for years at the world they can reveal in 30 and 60 seconds.
Right.
With different scenes, the storytelling that they do.
Right.
So I'm always sensitive to that and kind of love that. And,
Right.
But no, all research, I think. Whether you're going to visit a location that you want to write about or trying to remember and you need to go back and see it again. I mean, or you're reading a book on maybe life in Paris in the 18th century. I get ideas from it. All kinds of scenes spring into my mind. Characters sometimes spring into my mind. Sometimes I've taken a trip to do research and I've met somebody on the trip that became a character in the book. That happened when I was researching Feast of All Saints. We went back to New Orleans. We were still living in California then. You were about less than 2 years old. And we went down to New Orleans, and I remember I met this very beautiful woman in the Desire Oyster Bar. She was actually waiting on us. She was serving us. She was probably a college student who was a waitress. And the whole character of Annabella Monroe in that novel sprang to me when I was studying that young woman.
Right.
And how she talked and how she looked and everything about her. And so research to me is very creative and productive and exciting. I have to almost make myself stop doing it finally and then get to the book.
Right. Have you ever written about a place you have not been?
Oh yeah, many times.
Okay.
Yeah, I have to, from time to time.
Which one?
Oh, there are scenes in The Queen of the Damned that are supposed to take place in the Himalayas, and I've never been there. And I have not been there.
Right.
But I have been to an amazing number of places I write about. I really love to travel, and I have been many, many places.
Right.
I still hope to go to India and Turkey. I'm not going to Russia because they just declared that they will arrest gay-looking tourists who come to Russia, so I'm not going to go there.
Gay-looking
Yes,
tourists.
if you look obviously
That's every
gay.
man in New York.
If you look...
Stay put, fellas.
Well, you may get busted if you go to Russia and they think
I have no plans.
it's illegal
Yeah.
to promote.
No plans.
But I do want to go to India and Turkey.
Oh, but India is the place that you've never been that you dream about visiting.
It is, yeah. I'd love to go to Mumbai.
So if Anne Rice goes to India, will there be an Anne Rice novel that is
yes,
partially set in
absolutely.
India?
Yeah.
Yes.
Probably before Anne Rice goes to India.
Okay.
Right, as she does research for the trip.
As she gets the tax write-off file ready,
No,
right?
no.
Absolutely. Hey, we all do it. There's no shame in that. It's a business expense. But I think what's interesting is that your daily routine as a writer is not that stereotypical. I wake up, I roll out of bed, I pour myself a cup of coffee, and I sit at that computer for the first 3 hours of the day.
No.
Or I have the Stephen King 2,000 words a day word count that I try to hit. He said 1,500 in an interview recently, so watch him. He's going down. But that it is for you a larger and more inclusive process of a variety of different experiences that goes into your writing. But there is a line that I think you acknowledge there too, which is something I deal with, where research turns into procrastination.
Yeah,
you know?
oh, sure.
Right.
It's just so much fun. Why not read yet another book before you start?
Right, absolutely.
Read more about 18th century France.
You have to stop. What about dealing with real people? I mean, this is a conference that's about, with a lot of writers that are, some of them were in the profession, the intelligence or the law enforcement profession that they're now writing about, and the rest of them are completely dependent upon people who are in those professions to feed them. You know, obviously you haven't consulted with any real vampires because you don't believe that vampires are real. Oh, you're not answering now.
No, I haven't
No.
consulted with
Have you
them.
ever met a vampire?
I have not.
Okay. Or you have not met one who's been willing to be your research consultant?
No, but I have
Okay.
been frightened by some people that were pretending to be vampires.
Really?
Oh yeah, when we go to the Vampire Ball in New Orleans, the Lestat Fan Club Ball, people will show up with cat eye contacts in beautiful wigs and 18th century clothing, and they can be scary.
You realize that's
They
all
look-
your fault, right?
Yes, it's my fault, and I'm really terrified.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, speaking of what terrifies you, what could you not write about because it's too scary?
Oh, I don't know. Don't we all have things like that?
Yes.
I tell you the truth, I write about a lot of what I can barely stand to read about. You know, I write about things I am afraid of.
Like what?
Oh, I don't even want to go into it, but I mean, I've written a lot of awful scenes where violence happens and where I'm sort of working through my fear of violence on the page.
Right.
You know.
But I think the label of horror novelist is never one that's been applied to you very firmly. You know, I don't think people describe your work as horror. I think they think you have tackled a subject that was traditionally a horror subject. You took this staple of a genre.
Oh, there's some people who think I'm just a horror writer. They put it like that. They use the word
Just a horror writer.
Yeah, oh, sure.
What do you think they mean by that?
She writes about vampires.
Right.
Junk.
Then that automatically makes you
Yeah,
junk.
I think
And that's
so.
something you've been dealing with the whole ride.
Sure, and it doesn't bother me. I don't care anymore. I mean,
Right.
you know, I cared in the beginning.
How'd you get over it? Because I think we all deal with our own version
You
of it.
get over it because your readers help you get over it. They come up to you and they tell you how they feel about the books. At least that's how it happened to me. Or they send you a letter, or you meet them at a signing and you realize that they got what you were intending. And that feels wonderful.
Right.
That feels very good, and gradually you have to learn to think about that instead of the more casual or denigrating mentions, say, in a newspaper article or a review.
Right.
You know? It's hard to do it. I think
Yeah.
a negative statement can obliterate 20 positive statements, but you have to learn to reverse that.
I think it's also hard for writers, or it's hard for all of us in this internet age where it seems like the new belief is that the more negative things said about you online, the more famous and significant you are. You know, and it's
yeah.
hard not to go looking for it. I deal with
Yeah.
it. I think, well, I should go find out what the people who really hate me think.
Yeah,
You know, like,
yeah.
Because then that'll make me feel wounded and important. And I think writers
Yeah.
get stuck on that track, and we get
Right.
into these stupid fights online and on blogs about stuff that doesn't mean anything, that's not about writing.
Right.
And I'm as guilty as everybody else, so
Yeah.
I'm not trying
We
to...
have to resist that,
To
yeah.
judge. Right, we have to resist it. But it gets back to the whole social media thing. You really enjoy it, but is there ever a point where you think, I don't want to reveal any more about myself on social media? Like, this is too much. Like, this isn't about what I'm trying to do.
There are moments where I don't want to answer questions with any more specificity. I don't want to, go into it in any greater detail.
Right.
But, I don't think I could have done Facebook like this when I was younger. I think it would have been too upsetting.
Right.
I am older, and it's easier to take some of the things that happen. The people storming off the page, telling me to burn in hell forever, this type of thing.
Right. But then what you see is that when they tell you that 5 more times, they haven't left the page
Yeah.
because they couldn't post if they had left the page. So
Exactly.
Yeah. Right.
And the misunderstandings that happen.
Right.
The things that people. That's one thing it's taught me, that people can take things in such a variety of ways. I had no idea. So you learn to get a little more careful about what you're
There's no
saying.
tone on the internet. There's no tone. So you can read something and apply the voice of your most hateful social studies teacher shaking her finger at you, or
Yeah.
his finger. And so it's very easy, and people get really volatile real quickly. But for you, it's been a largely positive experience because you've built a community of people online, and that's
Yeah.
the thing. The thing that I think is sold to writers that's maybe a little dubious is that you can get hundreds of thousands of readers just by going on social media. What you can really do is organize the readers you already have into a coherent
You
kind
can
of group.
invite them to come there.
You can
and
invite
talk-
them to come
talk
in.
to you. Yeah.
And that way you
Yeah.
don't have that experience of going out into the world and
Right.
someone says, I read all 3 of your books and I didn't know you had another book.
Yeah.
Hopefully they'll know where you were saying or giving out that information, and it's on
Yeah.
Facebook or
Yeah.
Twitter. But not many people create the world that you've managed to create on Facebook,
Well,
which
I
is for the
really
large part a
enjoy-
positive
Yeah, I
thing.
enjoy talking to the people on the page. I really do. And I like answering the one-to-one questions, and I like asking them questions.
Right.
I mean, I'll ask them questions, and they'll give me 1,000 answers.
Yeah.
I'll say, if you liked The Vampire Lestat, why? What did you like about him? What was the one thing that you really liked about him?
Right.
And I just marvel at the feedback I get. It's fresh and spontaneous, and it's very informative.
Is
And
there ever a consensus, or is it always sort of diverse and
I would say the consensus about him is that what they loved about him was that he was bad and good. That he was capable of being a despicable villain, but he really had a great heart and really wanted to be good.
Right.
It was that mixture. That's what kept emerging from the answers. But the answers go all over.
Right. Okay, so now, fast forwarding to the present, werewolves. How did we get here? I don't mean there are any here right now. I just mean like emotionally for you. That's another convention. That's Comic-Con.
A friend of mine suggested, he sent me an email. It was Jeff Easton, TV producer of White Collar in Graceland.
Right.
And we communicate because I'm a big fan of White Collar. I love that show. And he said, if you ever, he had just read a book on werewolf literature. And he said, if you ever write a werewolf novel, I will certainly buy it. And for some reason, it struck me. For the first time, I thought, why don't I do that? Why don't I try that out? I was at a place where I wasn't too happy with what I was writing, and I put it aside. And I thought, I think I'm going to do that. And my sister, Alice Borchardt, had written a number of novels, very successful novels about werewolves, but we had lost Alice in 2007. And she had never, said to me, stay away from werewolves. I mean, she would have never said anything like that.
Stay away from werewolves, then. You got the vampires. I get the werewolves.
She never said such a thing, but I had always kind of left them to her.
We had a fight about aliens once.
Yeah,
You
I
remember
told
that?
you to stay away from aliens.
No, you came in and said you were going to do an alien novel, and I had been working on an alien idea, and I said, you have everything else. Give me aliens.
Okay.
And you said, but the problem with aliens in movies is that they always look like fish and they're hungry. That's the only alien story we ever get. And I know you're going to do philosophical violin playing aliens. But anyway, back to werewolves. So your friend Jeff Easton said, if you ever write a werewolf story, I will buy it. Okay.
So I thought I would do it, and I started to write The Wolf Gift. And first it was a TV idea. I wrote a treatment for TV.
I remember,
Sent
yes.
it off to my agent at CAA, and he thought it was very good and went out with it. And then I developed it into a novel, and I loved it. It was all brand new. I wasn't trying to build on, 4 books that had been written before, and it was a brand new cosmology for me, brand new ideas, and I really had a lot of fun with it.
But you had some, and because I know this, you'd had some hang-ups with werewolves in general from the outset. Primarily that the transformation was always so beastly, and bones cracking and flesh, and it wasn't really something that you were into.
Well, I didn't want to do it that way.
So you didn't. How did you do it?
I made it a delicious, sensuous transformation that the werewolf enjoyed and witnessed. And my man-wolf, Reuben, he remained completely conscious while he was in the state of being a man-wolf. More of an upright werewolf, like Lon Chaney in the old movies. Lon Chaney used to run around in his shirt and trousers.
Right.
But my wolf doesn't do that. He does, leave his clothes behind him and go off. But he's really a man-wolf, and he's conscious of it every minute. And it was a lot of fun to describe. I had to do it that way. It's the only way I know how to do anything.
Right.
If I can't do the individual sensitivity of that monster.
But you gave it I don't know if this is the right term, but like a moral core, right? The werewolves smell and hunt evil.
Yeah, they do.
Yes.
But as the books go on, they're going to run into problems over what
as werewolves
what
do.
What are you smelling as evil as opposed to what I'm smelling?
It smells like burnt toast to me. Am I having a stroke? So there's another one coming October 15th.
Yeah, October 15th, The Wolves of Midwinter, and I'm just getting started.
You're just getting started.
Yeah. I wanted this series to be, it wasn't even a matter of wanting, it just is more optimistic, more open, and I'm in the process of opening doors. The vampire books had a lot of sadness and grief and darkness in them, and I was always closing doors in those series.
What do you mean by that? Closing doors?
Closing off possibilities. Sort of writing a lot about despair, alienation. At the end of Memnoch the Devil, Lestat really just practically says farewell to the world and doesn't really come back for a long time, to the series. But in The Wolf Gift, I'm writing about a different kind of supernatural monster and a different kind of world. And I wanted to get away from the regret and the sadness and explore what happens when a monster just really loves being the monster, tearing people limb from limb. Bad guys
But it's
always.
bad guys,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, but still, it's he does tear
it
them
is
limb
a sort
from
of
limb.
superhero aspect to the monster.
Absolutely.
It is a
I was
monster
definitely
superhero.
wanting to explore the comic book superhero. I was
Right.
absolutely upfront about that. That's what he becomes, the California man-wolf.
Yeah.
And people make man-wolf T-shirts and man-wolf mugs and,
Yeah. Excellent. Okay, so you're incredibly influenced by TV. You post about TV a
Yeah,
lot. And
yeah.
you believe that we are in the golden age of television.
The new golden age,
Okay,
yeah.
what does that mean? Describe that
Well,
for
I
us.
think starting about 6-7 years ago, we started to see a huge jump in production values in TV miniseries. I noticed it first with The Tudors. Just a huge jump. I mean, Showtime had done my novel, The Feast of All Saints, on really what was a shoestring compared to what happened with The Tudors. When they did The Tudors, I mean, it was just the costumes, the lights, the cinematography, everything, the quality of the acting, all of it was just fantastic. And we began to see more and more series that came out that were fantasy, sci-fi, historical, fascinating stuff. And now I think we're just in the thick of a whole lot of it. Game of Thrones is, of course, the quintessential example. But there's another aspect to it, too, the aspect that involved The Sopranos. Things like that. I mean, and Breaking Bad, and just all kinds of things that people said could never be done on TV are now done on TV.
Right.
And it's really, I think, a great time for those of us who love fantasy, historical drama, thrillers, sci-fi, all of this. And even the weekly series on network are now, I think, just superb. We have some series that are just incredible, like Person of Interest, I think is a great series.
Right.
J.J. Abrams' Person of Interest. I love it, and we just never had that complexity before. That's why it's definitely, to me, a new golden age. People will look back on this and they'll study it.
Do you think we're in the golden age of movies?
No, I would say that we're not. But I don't go anymore. That's the sad
But you watch
truth.
them when they come out
I
on
watch
disc
them
and
when
we
they come
download
out.
them. Yeah.
But I mean, right now, I would rather work in TV with any book of mine than in the movies.
Interesting.
I don't really.
Why is that?
Because the chances of a big tent pole movie being done accurately of any book of mine are very small. But the chances maybe of doing a high-quality series with Showtime or Starz or HBO or I don't know, a number of other places, maybe that could happen.
Why do you think the chances of a big tentpole movie of your books being done accurately are small? Do you think the hang-ups are specific to the material, or do you think it's an industry problem right now?
So much money seems to be involved in making these movies, and so many compromises that there's not a likelihood of it being faithful. But I don't know. Anything can happen at any time.
Right.
That's definitely true. I mean, but I'm just more intrigued by what I see on television.
But the question then becomes, why would you need it to be a movie if the production quality on TV has gotten as high as it has, right?
Yeah. I mean, look at the Borgias. Look at the Borgias. I mean, Neil Jordan did that. He directed Interview with the Vampire and made it a great film, I thought. And then he went on and he did this thing on TV for Showtime, the Borgias. And to me, the cinematography was as beautiful as any I've ever seen on the big screen. It was just incredible. The costumes, the dialogue, everything. And Neil Jordan totally had his way with it. It was as eccentric as one can imagine. He did what he wanted to do with it. He transcended historical drama. He transcended history. He transcended everything with the Borgias. Then look what happened with him with a recent movie. He made a recent movie, Byzantium. It's very entertaining. It's very beautifully made. It's a small, romantic vampire movie.
Right.
But I just didn't. Where was the opportunity for him to do something as great as the Borgias? I didn't see it happening. I mean, I'm glad he made Byzantium, and I like it, and I recommend it, and I think it's a fine film. But it seemed with the Borgias that he really had a chance to just go out there and make history, really, and he did.
Right.
And that's exciting to me. So that's why, also, I don't go to movies anymore. I really don't. I just don't get to see them. And I do watch things at home on a large flat screen TV, and that's kind of where I live now.
Right. And your own experience with Hollywood you would describe as?
Abysmal. Yeah.
Abysmal.
Well,
okay.
Well, no. Interview with the Vampire was great luck. I mean, they did a beautiful job on that. David Geffen is a billionaire producer. He just went all the way with that movie. He hired Neil Jordan based on having seen The Crying Game. He hadn't even seen Company of Wolves, the great werewolf movie that Neil Jordan had done. But anyway, he let everybody go all the way with that film. But then after he moved and made a new studio and lost the property, look what happened. I mean, The Queen of the Damned, a small film made by studio producers that really disappointed the readers and really hurt the genre. I mean, not the genre, the franchise, to use the horrible word.
Maybe both, I don't know.
Yeah, but I mean, it's just there's so much luck involved with the studios. There's so much luck. And I haven't had good luck. It just hasn't happened. The Mummy never got made, even though James Cameron at one point wanted to make it. Didn't happen. The Witching Hour never got made. These things all reverted back to me. And I'm hoping I'll have better luck in TV.
Yeah, but it's not over yet either.
Oh, no.
You aren't going anywhere.
No.
On
my deathbed, I'll be, taking a call from CIA.
The Witching Hour, please.
Let's have a meeting.
Yeah, but you see the future of your properties as being on television.
I would like it to be high quality TV.
Yeah, high quality TV.
I really would.
I think a lot of people at this conference and in this the genre of thriller and mystery have been dealing with this for some time in Hollywood. As soon as the permissibility factor in terms of content on TV went up, the first thing that Hollywood producers said to you when you went out for film was, well, this sounds like a Law and Order episode. Why isn't it on TV? And it became increasingly harder to sell stuff for movies, but it also became, the TV field became bigger as you were describing it. Yeah. But is it something that you need? Like, is it something, you've had such success as a novelist, and we talk about this sometimes. Do you feel like, a lot of writers truly feel like the process is incomplete unless they either sell the movie rights for a substantial sum or see some adaptation made? And I don't think you feel that way anymore.
No, I don't feel that way. Yeah. I was very blessed. I made it up to the list without a movie. And so, and for years, my books sold without a movie. So I don't see it as a completion, because I do see what I'm doing as being complete between hard covers or paperback covers.
Absolutely.
But I love movies, and I love TV. I've loved movies since I was a little kid. I mean, and I would love to see it happen.
Yeah, absolutely. We have 10 minutes left. I am going to pull an old school Oprah and go out into the audience if we have any questions. If I can find my way to the stairs. Here we go, right here, because you're closest.
How is it that you can make your historical flashbacks so vivid and real? What do you do to make that happen?
Well, it's very natural to me to make the historical flashbacks real because they're so real to me. But I think in terms of technique, the secret is to write in the same detail and in the same tone that you use for any other part of the book. You know, you absolutely, you have to be as meticulous and as concrete when you describe the historic milieu as the contemporary milieu. That's the big trap, that you might change your tone for that flashback. And you don't want to do that. No.
Okay, next question, over on this side.
It's been a while since you've done the Mayfair Witches. My favorite book of yours is Taltos. I'm wondering how you felt about it and if it pops back into your thoughts and is still intriguing to you.
You know, I don't think a lot about continuing the Mayfair Witches or the characters. I'm not sure why. But I remember the whole thing, you know, as a love affair between me and the Mayfair family. And every now and then I think of writing about the Mayfairs today. But there would be a big jump in time. If I were to take them up again, it would probably be entirely new characters. And they'd be working again with the mystery of the Taltos species. And you know, what fascinated me in writing those books was what people will do to protect their own species. It was really another species that was threatening them. And it was a to the death kind of battle between them and the Taltos. And I would love to go back to that, I think, and explore it some more. So here, I changed my mind between starting.
She does that a lot, right here.
And I'll tell the story later of how when you asked me this question, it inspired the new book.
You mentioned that your vampire series was a lot of grief and despair, and I was just curious, how much of your own personal experience do you mine in your books? Is there, because I think we all have these certain experiences that we are kind of taboo that we don't want to tap into, but is that what makes you so successful in tapping into those experiences, is not no holds barred essentially with your own personal experiences, however painful they might be?
I do believe in going where the pain is. You know, that was advice that was given to me by a fellow writer, Floyd Salas. When I was very young, he said, go where the pain is when you write. Don't shy away from it. Explore the pain. And later I added to that the words, go where the pleasure is. Go where the pain is, go where the pleasure is. But I deliberately do try to dig very deep into the pain. And again, I get wrapped up in the story. That's my way of doing it. I don't sit there and think about the agony I felt when, you know, I lost my mother or my daughter or my husband. I just am in that story with the people. And I'm getting into the agony through them. And it can be very exhausting and very draining. And I think it can leave you feeling absolutely turned inside out when a novel's finished. You know, I remember talking to my editor, Vicki Wilson, and I'd say, I don't ever want to do this again. You know, this was so dark. This was so awful. I can't write about these characters again. And then inevitably I go back to them, you know.
I have a question, Ms. Rice. What about another memoir?
Oh, I'm not a natural memoir writer. I'm not a natural memoir writer.
Well, you wrote one called Called Out of Darkness, which is about your experiences with religion.
It is, but but I would sometimes just like to write about our time in New Orleans. I would like to call it Going South.
Right.
Like, you know, when a deal goes south. You know? I would like to describe what it was like for us leaving San Francisco and going down there, and the 15 years we spent down there and what we learned.
You used to tell me that I should write that book before I
well,
pointed
you
out that
haven't
you were
done
the
it.
one who kept bringing it up, so it sounded like your book. So,
Yes, right.
But you know, it's just surprising to me that with the amount of time you spend on Facebook, that you don't want to write a longer work of nonfiction.
maybe
I
I
mean that in seriousness, because Facebook is a kind of journal for you. It is,
Yeah,
and
it
so
is,
just
yeah.
cut and paste all the posts together, and then, you know, we'll publish that, you know, the next memoir.
I do have a couple of people on Facebook who ask me questions all the time.
Right.
And I know they're doing something with those answers. You
Well, what do you think they're giving them to the NSA,
I mean,
maybe?
They're saving them. They're saving them.
Although I don't think they need to
there's
work very
one
hard to
guy
find out
on-
about the Rices.
There's one guy on Facebook, Joaquin, and he's always asking me these very pointed questions. And I finally
How
said,
many
"What?"
steps to your coffee maker from your office? Yeah.
Well,
Don't
he-
answer that question.
He
by
told
the
me
way.
he's saving all that material, so I don't know what he's going to do with it.
That's a little
I think
creepy.
he lives in South America.
Yeah. Okay, so this is a standard question, but it's one that we don't often talk about. Is there an area of the supernatural you haven't touched yet that you want to go towards?
I don't know. I want to write a lot more about ghosts. I've already written some about ghosts, but I want to write more. Discarnate entities, ghosts, spirits. You know, I'm putting a lot of that into the Wolf Gift novel. In the Wolves of Midwinter, a number of spirits pop up. You know,
Right.
a whole type of spirit actually pops up, and a ghost. And I want to get more into that, the cosmology of ghosts. I read a lot of what psychics say about the other side, and I read it just in many ways as fun research.
Right.
You know, I read these books all the time, Voices from the Other Side, Advice from the Other Side,
Right.
you know, this person channels and so forth, and I'm always sort of studying that whole area.
Right.
Non-judgmentally, just for what's inspiring to me as a fiction writer. But that I've already done. I don't think it's a new area. And I may want to get to aliens someday.
No, we have a deal. Our aliens will be so different. Who are you reading right now, fiction-wise? You read
Well,
a lot of
actually,
nonfiction, but I
I
saw you
do.
getting into bed with someone the other
I
night.
do.
That Jack
read,
Reacher.
I read Doug Preston a lot.
Yeah.
I read Lee Child a lot.
Uh-huh.
I read a lot of people. I like Charlene Harris
Yes.
a lot. And I also read some older people. I just finished a wonderful novel, King's Row, by Henry Bellamy. It was a great big bestseller in the 1940s, and I learned a lot from that novel. I was just blown away. And Mario Puzo, I just read a novel he wrote, The Fortunate Pilgrim. So I read all over the map. You know,
Yeah.
I'm always buying huge old books and new books and new people.
You know, it's also okay to say my novel.
And
You know, yeah.
Christopher Rice, The Heavens Rise. Yeah.
It's okay. I won't get offended if you say
You're very talented.
my novel, which comes out on the same day hers does, October 15th.
October 15th.
Actually, how much time do we have left? 3 minutes. Is that enough for another question? Yes, we'll take one last question.
Chris, that's one of the best interviews I've ever seen, and you did it totally without notes. You may have yet another career.
Well, I have an internet radio show every Sunday night. He is not a plant, I promise. TheDinnerPartyShow.com, check it out. And Mom is a frequent guest on
Yes,
The Dinner Party
yeah.
Show. I think that about wraps it up for us.
It's been a pleasure.
It has been. It's always a pleasure, Miss Rice. It's been a pleasure.